The stump speech is based on the idea that on average, you're going to get in front of small groups and sometimes only have 2 to 3 minutes to talk. It's called a stump speech because like 200 years ago, people would stand on the tree stump and they would give a speech to the voters and hoping to win their elections. And today it comes on, oftentimes people talk about talking on their soapbox because that was a thing like in the 30s. And so a stump speech, which is going to be from 1 minute to 3 minutes, summarizes exactly where you are on the issues that are important for your campaign. One of the reasons this is so difficult, and it's frustrating to say, but most people don't want to have a serious conversation about real issues. They want things to be summarized. They want to know, if you're a conservative, they want to know that you're pro-life, that you're some kind of religious person. What church do you go to? Which religion? Sometimes they don't care. They just want to know you go to church. And where are you on funding our troops? Sometimes a veteran will ask you a question, and that's it. And so touching on these items, or what your polling and research has shown you are the key issues, are going to be as far as the voter actually goes. So there's always a tendency when I've got candidates, especially the more successful they are, the harder this is for them, because you're surrounded in a business environment or even in a political environment. If you're used to being on the Hill or working at your state capitol or whatnot, you're used to being surrounded by people that are neck deep in all these issues and know what's going on and actually care about these issues. When you're out going door to door and talking to voters, they kind of care, but they're kind of busy and they don't give a shit. That's why they're just looking to vote as easy as they can based on a couple of issues. I was working a campaign and I was in New Hampshire with a candidate. And he kept wanting to have these lengthy discussions with everybody he met. And you could see them using their nonverbal flight responses. They're turning away from him. They're like, yeah, thank you. And they're walking, and he keeps trying to talk to them. And I said, yeah, sorry, I know you have nice things to say, but candidates, you got to sum it up. 30 seconds, you're in and out. If they want more, they'll give approval signals. They'll turn towards you. They'll show interest. But most of the time, if you go on for too long, you're gonna see those nonverbals say, thank you, but get away from me. I'm done now, right? So in order to make sure that we can keep people's attention, we keep these speeches small so they know where you are. They just don't care about the other things. And when you're successful and you're used to dealing with serious people, it can be very frustrating not to have a real conversation. You can win people over in 30 seconds when you're campaigning, and that's possible. It's not as easy in business to do that. In other types of work, it's much more difficult, I think, to win over individuals because it takes more. You have to keep in mind that the average voter already has a full-time job. The average voter is of average intelligence and of average understanding of the issues and only see them in an average way. This is something that oftentimes people have talked about, the dumb white voter, right? Well, the idea isn't that they're dumb. They just have 50 other things. And if your values line up, then that's good enough for them. They understand that they don't know about international economics. They understand they don't have an in-depth understanding of foreign policy. They just need to know that they've got somebody that they can count on to handle that, because they don't want to. They don't want to. They just want to know that if you're willing to do it and you're not a communist who's going to try to take away their guns, they're happy. But you have to illustrate how you're going to implement these ideas, and you have to do it better than your opponent. And that can be kind of tough. And that's where you have the edge when you have your issues together. You can communicate them simply. You can communicate them directly. And they don't have to say when they're filling out the ballot, I don't know how that guy stands on this issue. They should know. They should know. And so the stump speech is the beginning of your training as a candidate and getting used to talking about things in a very simple way to people who just don't care or want any of the depth that's involved in more complicated issues. And so I found this very frustrating when I first got involved. I was like, my God, if we just have a conversation about it, they'll understand why they're wrong. And they won't have a conversation about it. They don't care about the trade imbalance with China. They don't care. That's why the News media, Fox is a good example. I'll pick on them because they're conservative, but Fox is a perfect example. You can turn on Fox News in the morning. You can listen to what they're talking about that day. Then what the news introduces, they then have a person come on and say how they feel about that issue. They'll say, well, I think because the president did this. Go to a door, and as you're going throughout the day, ask people what they think about the issue. Casual conversation with a voter at the door. If they're a conservative and they watch the news, they'll regurgitate that opinion because it's just as far as they thought about it. That's why we could probably talk about psychology and propaganda and all that stuff, but that's really just as far as they can really go because they're not going to sit down and read a book on trade policy to see why maybe that news commentator was wrong. And the same thing's true of CNN and MSNBC. These people, even though they're statistically more educated than our voters, Democrats are, which is interesting, they have a tendency to be even less critical of the news and less critical of the information that they get and would be much more susceptible to a stump speech than a conservative. So that makes it very interesting dealing with these voters. I had a candidate that just didn't understand this, and we were knocking on doors. God, where were we? New Hampshire. And there were these protesters, and he goes, they're protesting Republicans, Rich. I just don't think any of us have ever talked to them. Maybe we just need to go over and have a conversation. Now, I admired this idea that we should sit down and talk to these people. The altruism that came with his desire to go and talk to those people in the middle of a protest was admirable. So we crossed the street, right? And we're going across the street, and I'm like, okay, if they surround us, I'm getting out of here because I'm not going to be surrounded by crazy left-wing liberals screaming and holding signs and throwing things at me. I'm just not going to do that. So he's talking and he goes, guys, we just need to talk. And so he starts to talk, and I notice that the crowd starts to surround us, and they're screaming and yelling, and liberals are racist, and and I'm standing right beside him, like, you know. Anyway, so they're yelling, and it's kind of funny because I just decide to start stepping back. By the time I had gotten myself out of the circle, he was completely surrounded, and they're yelling at him, and they're starting to throw food at him. And the look on his face when he realized I was not there was priceless. I learned a very valuable lesson in that moment as well, is that if you're going to step into the fire, make sure it's with a candidate with a little bit more sense. I got a lot of guys I've worked with who I would not have abandoned there, but he was not one of them. So his determination to talk to them was admirable, and I respect it and appreciate it, but it was stupid. And you have to face the facts that you're talking to voters who don't have time for a real conversation. And when once a week a voter actually wants to hear more than just a 2-minute explanation, please talk to them. I always, when I'm going door to door, if I meet a voter that wants to have a real conversation, it's wonderful. What a nice break from the day of, yes, I'm 2A, yes, I support this, or yes, my candidate believes in this, yes, my candidate believes in that, and then we're done. It's cool, it's nice that we get it, because the studies show that interaction at the door statistically works. But it's nice when somebody actually wants to have a real conversation, and you have to fight those instincts when you're doing your stump speech and when you're using that when you're going door to door. So good luck putting your stump speech together. It's going to be a great experience, and continue to stay positive no matter how hard the campaign gets.